Hello everyone, welcome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brad Pinchuk, and I've been here for a very long time, 25 years with the organization. Today I want to formally introduce, some of you have probably heard of or met Richard, but I want to formally introduce Richard Stocking to the organization. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I've been kind of the CEO for a while here as this organization's grown and developed. And recently Richard has joined us, been with us for a few months officially.
Yep.
And I'm proud to share the CEO responsibilities, really the leadership responsibilities in the organization. Richard and I are now attached to hip and in co-leading the organization. So it's a pleasure to share it with you, Richard.
Yeah, and vice versa.
Yeah. So a lot of you probably are like, well, okay, well, who is this guy? Kind of what's all he about? Where's the organization going? What do we got planned? I can tell you we're super excited about the future of this organization, and we're excited to share that with you. Before we get into that, and I think it's building up to kind of where we're going. It's important. Let's focus on Richard and kind of where he's come from, and maybe Richard, if you would, for everyone, give him a chance to get to know you. I mean, it's a great story, if you wouldn't mind sharing it with everyone.
Would love to. I grew up in a family of 9 kids, raised by a single parent, my mother, and so learned a lot of lessons along the way there. I had a chance to start in trucking, when I was 21. I started out as a customer service rep and kind of sat in every operations and sales seat along the way before becoming president and CEO at Swift Transportation.
So that's kind of a quick background on your history there. So, growing up with a single mother, 9 kids, that must have been, it must have been pretty challenging.
Very challenging. And kind of rewarding at the same time, because it really helped me become who I am today. I always think back to those days, and as you can imagine, things at times could get pretty skinny with 9 kids and a single parent. But it taught us to be together, to trust each other, to hang tough during the bad times, and celebrate the good times. So learned a lot of lessons in my youth.
So. You go off to college. That would have been like what happened after?
Yes.
I mean, you're coming from a family of you don't have a lot of resources, things like that. Obviously, growing up, you know, making sure everyone's getting fed. But then you start thinking about getting through high school, so on and so forth. I mean, talk to us about
Yeah. What's interesting is I actually left for a couple years on a mission.
Okay.
And served in. For 2 years in Virginia, West Virginia, and a little bit of North Carolina. And that's where I really grew up. I guess the first 6 months, really learning how to approach people, how to talk to folks, really kind of defined that I could be somebody, that I could actually do something. And then I meant something to others. And that's really what got me inspired. That's where I started my leadership. I started leading groups of people, other folks that are serving out there in the mission field, kind of a district leader type scenario to assistant to the president. And so I got to learn a lot. I got to speak a lot in public, both with small groups and large groups. Mm-hmm. And that's really where I grew the most, I think.
And did that just come naturally to you, those leadership qualities, the ability to speak in public? I mean, were you taught those things?
I was so scared to speak in public. It really was. Almost to where it made me sick. Because I was just kind of this shy farm kid who then is kind of thrust out there to the public, which really kind of helped me. I remember a time when I was speaking to a lot of Wall Street analysts and investors, and they're asking me questions about the economy and GDP and all these things. And I remember standing there looking at the group, thinking back to those mission days and how far I had actually come and progressed in that public speaking. So no, it didn't come naturally, but I had a lot of opportunity to practice.
So you have this incredible experience for 2 years doing this mission work, very meaningful work, and growing yourself individually through that process.
Yeah, and then I came back, started through college and working at the same time at Swift.
Okay.
And it was just supposed to be a stop. I was just going to.
And why Swift? Why did you start working there?
Yeah, because my mother was related to Jerry Moyes, and he offered me to work as a customer service rep. That's how I got into the industry. And again, it was only supposed to be a short time. But my real education really came from Swift and from the customers and the drivers and leadership opportunities. And I mean, that real life experience was much like the mission field to me. It taught me that this industry is just, as you know, it's engaging, it's exciting, it's hard, but it's very noble, and that's what connected me. I remember working in Phoenix, and I had all the outside terminal trucks, and it was my goal to help them succeed with them and their families, and I could do a lot of different things. I had to be very creative in doing so. And I think one of the positions I really enjoyed the most was probably planning, where I would plan the drivers and the trucks and the loads, and I really loved that puzzle. And it was a new puzzle every day, and I really thought that that's what I was going to do for my career. But obviously one thing led to another, and I think I was blessed and fortunate to have those opportunities, which kind of leads us to where we're at here today.
It's funny, I started, when I got into the trucking after the military, I started as a customer service representative as well, and also enjoyed the planning. I enjoyed many aspects of what I learned in my career along the way, but the planning one was probably the one that I probably did the longest of any of them, and the one that maybe challenged me quite. It's a fun position.
It really is a challenge every day.
Yeah.
And you had to use your brain and be very creative.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about this scenario is that we've had a similar background, and similar love for the transportation industry, and blessing a lot of people along the way, which I think is a great connection.
Yeah, it really is. In terms of maybe describing how we came together and so forth for the group. Kind of a funny story, really. You were firmly in the role of CEO and leading Swift, the largest trucking company in the industry. And at Hirschbach, as I mentioned, I started working at the organization 25 years ago. I didn't have any ownership or any family involved in the business, but I wanted to have some ownership. And along the way, I earned some ownership along the way for some sweat equity, a very small percent. And the son and I wanted to buy the business as 50-50 partners from a father. And we couldn't agree on price. And so we ended up actually marketing the business to be sold.
Yep.
And we met during that.
Yeah, we did.
Where you kicked the tires, and I can remember sitting across from you.
Yep.
And
I remember that day as well.
And Jenny, I think, the CFO.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I can remember sitting across like a conference room table, boardroom table in Minneapolis.
That's right.
And it was a little bit like being interviewed in a sense for a job, because I would have worked for Richard had the deal come through and so forth. And I could still remember that conversation.
That was 10 years ago.
It was 10 years ago, almost to the day. I mean, I think it's just slightly less than 10 years. So it's amazing. Obviously neither of us had any idea at that point.
Not at all.
And really, since that, after that point, we didn't. We had that interaction, and then didn't really stay in touch after that. And you continued to do your thing, and then obviously, what was it, 5-6 years ago?
Right.
So you became the CEO at Swift, and one of the things I wanted to maybe talk about, I guess we can finish this story a little bit on how we came together, but I want to come back to when you were leading Swift, because I think it's particularly when you first came into the situation and what the environment was like and driver retention and some of these areas, and kind of come back to that. But to finish up on how we came together, Tom Jr. and I ended up buying the business as 50-50 partners. Tom retired in 2019, and then I started buying him out, and he's now been he's officially retired from the business and no longer involved. And so I wanted to surround myself with some advisors, form an advisory board, and get some people, some outside ideas, and into my brain and into the organization to bounce some things off of. And so the first name that I thought of was Richard. And even though that it had been at this point 9 years since we first met, and really I don't think we had any interactions after that.
No, we didn't.
That was the first name that came to my mind, and so I remember reaching out and talking about this opportunity and catching up with you on the exciting things that you had done in your career at Swift and then after Swift. And fortunately, you joined us as an advisory member.
Which has been great, right?
Yeah.
That was felt honored to be able to come on and work with you and other really good people in the industry.
No, it was definitely a blessing and something that was at the right time, because it was when the board was formed, and there's 6 members, and when the board was formed, immediately an opportunity, before even our first meeting happened, an opportunity came about to potentially acquire JCT, John Krishner Trucking. And so our first board meetings were really, not your normal. It wasn't get to know the business and so on and so forth. We were on Zoom or team meetings talking about this opportunity. So it's kind of interesting how that opportunity quickly brought this board together to get engaged in the business and this opportunity.
And it's been a blessing ever since. It's been a fast and furious, but a great ride.
Yeah, it really has. The deal came about 11 months ago. We closed on JCT, and and Richard and the other advisory members have been really great in being able to talk about the business and different opportunities and so forth. But Richard had also at this time had started his own business. And the business was in helping other businesses, really, is what your business was out there doing, both in our industry and outside of our industry. And as I came to get to know Richard even more so through the capacity as being an advisory board member, learning more about him and what he was doing, I became pretty intrigued on the success that he had in taking over the role at Swift. If you look at a trucking company and its health, right, the primary workforce are the drivers out there.
Very much so, yeah.
And they're out there doing the hard work every day. Everyone in the organization is doing hard work. Don't get me wrong there, but their jobs are really challenging. Having spent time in the Army, the drivers are like the infantry, and they're out in front, and we're asking them to take the hill. In this case, safely deliver the load from one place to another. And it only happens with the drivers doing what they need to do, as well as everyone else that is part of the team in various support roles, them doing what they need to do. And one of the things that really piqued my interest in talking to Richard is when he took over Swift, and I don't know, how many trucks?
When I started, it was 1,200, and when we retired, there was about 18,000.
Okay. And when you took over as CEO, how many?
We had to have had 15,000.
Okay, so 15,000 trucks, and I don't know how many drivers more than that.
Oh, yeah.
And And tell me about like what driver retention was like at that time
Yeah.
when you took over the helm.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we took over, it was right before the recession, right? And the downturn, with really focusing on our drivers.
So this would have been 07?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had pretty high turnover. We trained a lot. We brought a lot of people into the industry. We hired a lot of folks and trained them to be a driver and to then possibly become an owner-operator and own their own business. And you know, our turnover is well over 100, and you know, that's tough to say because that's a lot of work that is feeding 15,000 trucks.
Yeah.
And so you spend a lot of time and effort to make that happen. So we really wanted to reduce the turnover and increase our retention. So we really focused on having 2 jobs, either driving jobs or driver support.
Yeah.
And so we went through all of the different departments, you know, from payroll and driver leaders and planning, customer service and safety and maintenance and so on and so forth. And we really wanted our drivers to grade us on every interaction, every phone call, every message, any interaction they had. We really wanted to know how we were doing. And so we really focused on the driver and how we could improve as an organization. We found out the top 10 irritants that they had, and we focused on the top 1 or 2 until we have solved them. We communicated to the drivers, and then the next ones would come up. And you know, and we reduced our turnover down into the high 60s.
How long did that take? I mean, you're well over 100. Now you're down into the 60s.
Yeah.
I mean, that's and it's the largest group of drivers in the industry.
Sure.
That.
And I think the recession obviously helped, right? To where our drivers really were sticky to us for a while because it did creep back up a bit in the 70s and 80s. But we were able to sustain that. But Brad probably took us a year or so to get there. Again, we had some help with the recession helped people stay put for a while, but it gave us a chance to solidify our processes, align what we were doing to retain our drivers.
Yeah, but you know, those results, even, you know, you talk about it drifting up a bit into the 70s or low 80s. I mean, those are respectable results in any environment in this industry for a driver that's being asked to do these very difficult jobs and sleeping in their trucks, being away from home for extended periods of time. Those are. So anyway, I know that really piqued my interest in learning that about, and I know there were a lot of people involved in making that happen on your team.
And I would say, you know, growing our dedicated obviously helped with the predictability and the home time and the paychecks of our drivers.
Sure.
And like you said, I mean, we just had a lot of people that cared about the drivers and focused on the drivers.
Yeah. And then I know when you retired from Swift and started your own business.
Yeah.
I mean, you took obviously a lot of what you put into practice and learned to work with other companies. I know some of those were other trucking companies that you and your team were instrumental in helping them to reduce driver turnover as well.
Yeah. Same principles worked in these other environments in other companies. You know, from a handful of trucks to several hundred trucks to, you know, thousands of trucks. And these principles don't get old. They're true. They're tried. They're tested. And it really comes down to that relationship that you have with the driver and their driver support. And they want to get home on a predictable basis, and they want predictability in their paychecks. And if you can handle those 2 items, all these other things, you know, support those two initiatives, you can retain your drivers.